Okay guys, I got a guy who brought me the generator to get it running. It's been sitting, hasn't been running in a while. They're thinking it's the sensor for the oil shutoff. So I'm going to go ahead and make a video showing you how to check that, how to bypass it if you need to, how to swap it and put another one in. But I thought I'd take the time for this generator to let you know, or to educate you on what I know on how to get them started if they've been sitting, if you don't know what's wrong with it, troubleshoot it. One of the most common things that are wrong with this is that people let them sit over the winter, and then in the summer they want to use them, or they let them sit over the summer and in the winter they want to use them, but they didn't shut the fuel off, so the carbs always get gummed up. I noticed this one has the fuel on, so whether or not they tried to get it started since it's been sitting, or whether or not it's been in this position is, we don't know. So it's always good to look at that first and see, did it get sit like that over the months? If it did, then there's fuel in the carburetor. Anytime you let these things sit for months, if you don't know, what you do is shut the gas off and let it continue to run until it runs out of gas so that the carburetor is completely clean before you store it. A lot of times we don't do that. We get in a hurry or we just don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by troubleshooting the three things that this generator needs to run: gas, air, and spark. Let's make sure we have all three of those things. If we have them, then we're good to go. So the first thing I want to do is pull the spark plug out. This particular one, the fuel tank is sitting so close to it that you can't get in there with the spark plug wrench. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a socket and a 3/4 wrench on the end of that socket, like that. So let's go ahead and pull the spark plug out and see if it has a spark. That will tell us a lot of things. If it has a spark, then we know the oil sending unit is good because it's allowing the spark. That sending unit, when the low oil comes on, this little indicator light, and the light may not be working, you don't know if yours is any good, you can always just disconnect that, let the wires hang, and that kind of bypasses it. Just tape them up out of the way, and then it doesn't need it. It's when it makes the connection is whether it or not that it's going to shut it down. But in this case, if we have a spark, then we know that that's working. So let's pull that off, put the spark plug in the wire, ground the plug, and see if we have a spark first. That's our first thing that we want to check. Let's check spark, then we'll check air, then we'll check fuel. Okay, so our first task, we got the socket in there. See how there's just no clearance? So that's why we're going to use a wrench. We're just going to stick it on there like that and take out the spark plug in that manner. While I'm doing this, I want to mention something that I've seen online. All these little Briggs and Stratton engines, people claim that they can get them to run on water or fumes or vapor. There's even a guy who claims that they can run on coffee. I'm going to make a small video. I have a brand new Briggs and Stratton engine, and I'm going to make a small video. I'm going to hook up one of those, and I'm going to let it run, and I'm going to show you guys why it doesn't work. The things that they don't show you in their videos. Such a crock, and they make people waste their money and waste their time. And so I'm going to expose all those guys and explain to you why you don't want to do that. Meanwhile, yeah, so look out for that video. So now we're pulling off the spark plug. There it is. And I think I'm going to have two hands to get it out. It's stuck in there pretty good. So let me pull that. Okay, so we have the spark plug out, and I placed it back into the spark plug wire. Now I'm just going to let it ground out somewhere, the side of it. Face the filament there towards you so that you can see if there's a spark when it comes. So now I've got it grounded out there. Now I'm just going to pull it and see if we got a spark. So let's just pull it. I can't get the video on it so that you can see it while I pull it, but I did see a spark. Let me hold my hand right there. There, seen the spark. So now we know it has spark. So we're good to go. That tells me a couple of things. One, spark plug is probably good. Two, the sending unit, the oil pressure shutoff switch is good. Because if that was a low oil or if that sensor was bad, I wouldn't get a spark. It would shut down the engine. So that's good. Three, it tells me I can move on to air and fuel. So that's just doing that right there tells you a lot of things about your engine. Your coil is good, the sensor is good, the spark plug is good. There's a lot of information right there. So now we're going to move on to the next step. The next step would be air. Let's go ahead and pull off the air filter, make sure there's nothing clogging it and that it's getting plenty of air. Okay, so I've loosened up the bottom screw. There's the top one. So my air filter, it's a little bit dirty, but it's definitely getting air. So now I've got air going into the carburetor. And another way to determine this is that if this is plugged up, it would choke out. If it was plugged, this would be saturated with fuel. You'd be able to smell it. It would be choking out. It would be flooding. And I think you understand that. So now we have plenty of air going in there. We can now put the spark plug back in and try to pull start it and see if it starts. If it doesn't, then we're moving on to the next item, which is fuel. And in this case, I can tell there's plenty of air going into here. There's nothing restricting it from getting air, so we're good in that manner. So now we have spark and we have air. Our next problem is fuel. Again, we're ruling out the sending unit, we're ruling out the coil, we're ruling out the plug, we're ruling out the air. Let's go now to the fuel. And for this task, this is actually pretty easy to start off. 1, make sure that your fuel is on the on position. 2, underneath the carburetor, there's a bowl. This bowl holds the fuel. Let's just crack the line underneath and see if there is fuel that comes out of the bowl. We're not going to pull this off. We're just going to crack the line. There it is. You see the fuel dripping? So now we know we have fuel. So this engine has 3 things, the 3 main things that it needs to run. But is the intake actually getting the fuel? We know now that there's fuel in the tank. We know that there's fuel in the line. We know that the shutoff is working correctly. We know that the fuel is traveling from the shutoff to the carburetor. The only thing that we have left at this point, we've ruled out spark, we've ruled out air, we've ruled out fuel to the carburetor and into the carburetor. The only thing that we haven't ruled out is fuel going into the intake from the carburetor. At this point, we're going to need to pull the carburetor. You can go ahead and just leave the valves and such alone right now. If you're worried about that, that's not going to matter. At this point, if you have those 3 items, this vehicle will run. The generator will run. It may run like crap because it has bad valves, but it will try to start. In this case, that's not our problem. So let's rule out the valves for now. If we have to get into that, we can. Now we need to pull off the carburetor. By doing that, we're going to pull off the rest of the air intake cover, and I believe there's a couple of bolts right in here. There's Phillips bolts and a 10mm. So let's go ahead and pull that off, and then we're going to start on the carb itself. Okay, so I pulled off the air intake cover. At this point, the carburetor comes a little bit loose. Be sure that your fuel is shut off at this point, otherwise you're going to lose a lot of fuel. So now we need to take off a couple more things. One here is the idle, the throttle. And so that's just going to lift up out of the way. But in order to get that off, we need to twist the carburetor and maneuver it out. So let's disconnect the fuel line. That's just going to take a pair of pliers, and we're just going to squeeze that clamp and pull it back. Okay, so we've disconnected the fuel line. Now the carburetor just rotates up and out of the way, and you can see that clamp comes out. So here's the carburetor. So we can look right here inside the intake at this point, and there is absolutely no fuel that's been going inside there. None. So now I know it's the carburetor that's not doing its job. Let's take this over to the desk and dissect it and see what we got to do to clean it up. There's a small little air jet inside of these. Sometimes people clean these, they put them together and they still don't work. We don't want to miss that one. It's very important. It creates a vacuum and pulls the fuel into the intake. So just by cleaning it, pulling the bowl, adjusting the float, adjusting the needle valve, those things are not all that we want to do. We got to get some air into this thing, introduce air, and push a lot of those little clogs out of there, if that's the case. And you'll know when you pull the bowl off by how dirty it is. Or if somebody else has cleaned it, if it's super clean. If it's super clean and it still doesn't work, they probably missed that air jet. If it's super dirty, then nothing has been cleaned yet, and we don't want to miss that air jet. So let's go ahead and get this over to the desk. Okay, so now we have the carburetor off. Let's start off by removing this bowl. Now this is going to have fuel inside of it if that fuel line was working correctly. And you remember when we took off the 10mm down there, some fuel did drain out. So you're going to have some fuel here. If you don't want to mess, when you pull this bolt, hold it over top of a can or something and pull that fuel out. Now don't just let it go into the trash, because we can use that fuel to clean this entire carburetor. That's enough. So go ahead and pour that into something. Pull out this bolt and let that drain into something. And be careful when you pull off this bowl, because there is a rubber seal that goes right around there where my thumb is, and we don't want to ruin that, or you'll be buying a rebuild kit. And those things are really common to leak, so be careful when you pull off that bowl. Okay, so I've just cut the bottom off of a gallon jug, and it makes a nice little tray here to hold the fuel and all my parts so I don't lose them. So, excuse me, I pulled off that bowl, and now you see my floats moving up and down here. I can go ahead and pull that out. So there's a little keeper here, and this will come out either direction, left or right. Pull the keeper out, throw it in your tray so you don't lose it. Pull the float out, and right behind the float will be your needle valve. And there's the float, And there's my needle valve right there. This thing's pretty dirty on the inside, so this could be our problem right here. And you can telltale sign right there in the bottom of your bowl. See how dirty that is? So that means some of that dirt is probably in those air intake jets that we were talking about. So now at this point, we've got that completely cleaned out or taken apart. So we're going to go ahead and then if you look right down inside, let me see if you can see it there, where your needle valve went. Right here is where we're going to clean. Now there's a seat down inside of there. Don't apply a whole bunch of air pressure through all these holes until you know that that seat is either come out or didn't come out. Keep a hand over top of it because you could blow it right out of there. If you have an air compressor that you can adjust it down to about 15 or 20 pounds because 100 pounds of pressure will blow that seat out of there, and they're a pain in the butt to get back in. And this seal right here, if it wants to stay, let it stay. If it tries to move at all, go ahead and remove it. This is the one we talked about that leaks a whole lot. So let's start off by going ahead and blowing some air down through all these jets. Right here where your fuel line goes in, you're going to blow that one. There is, should have been one on this side, but it looks like it's seated. We don't have to worry about this screw too much. But at this point, we're just going to use the fuel that we have down inside of here, and we're going to clean really good. We're going to pull off anything we can pull. Here's the air jet we talked about. This one right here, we need to make sure that it's clean, and I can tell that it hasn't even been removed in a long time. That takes a large flathead screwdriver. So let's go ahead and pull that off. Yours may be down inside. That's why I kept staring inside there. Most commonly, especially on motorcycles, they're down inside there with a little air jet that comes out, and that'll have holes in it. And most people miss those, and you want to clean both of those. There's two of them, and you want to clean both of those really well because those little tiny, tiny holes is what creates that vacuum and allows that fuel whether to go into the intake or not. So let's go ahead and continue to clean and pull apart what we can pull apart. Alright guys, so when I pulled that little jet off, it was right there, I noticed down in the middle I don't see a hole. And I can see a kind of shiny spot where there's fuel, but there's no actual hole. I blew through it, and there's no, I can't blow through it with my mouth, so it's going to need to be cleaned. So I believe that's my perpetrator and the reason why this carburetor was not getting any fuel. But we're going to continue to clean. So let's go ahead and throw that in there and let it soak up a little bit. That we can apply all the air pressure we want to. As long as we hold it tight, we can shoot air right through it. Okay, so I believe I have it completely stripped. I hope you have yours stripped down here at this point. If you're not sure about these because you've never tackled them, don't be afraid to tackle them. They're not that hard. Just keep track of all your little pieces. And what I used to do years ago was just pull something, take a picture. Pull something, take a picture. Just take a picture when you're about to pull it even. If I'm going to pull that screw out, I'll point like that and I'll take a picture. And then if you, especially if you have a screen available, you can load up all your pictures when you're done taking it apart and clean everything. And when you're about to put it back together, go back to the very last picture and work your way backwards and you'll know exactly how to put it together. It's as simple as that. Modern technology makes things so simple and easy today. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and clean the exterior of the carburetor as well. So there I see I have another jet right there I need to pull. So I'm going to go ahead and clean the exterior as well. Might as well make it look good, right? And we'll get it put back together. Now I'll show you how to adjust those floats. This one here is a non-adjusting float, but you may have one that is adjusting, so I'm going to show you how to adjust those. The easiest way is when you assemble it back together, turn the carburetor upside down, and you might have seen this on my 650 or 750 double pump or Holly that I did, or Edelbrock I mean. You adjust it so the float is perfectly level with the bottom of the carburetor. So some of them have little tabs there that you can bend and adjust. So pretty much essentially what you're going to do is when it's sitting on top of there, you don't want it sitting like that. You want it to be spring loaded and straight across, even with the carburetor. And that's with the carburetor upside down. That's a rule of thumb. If you don't have a filler gauge or something like that, or you're not sure, that'll be perfectly fine. Just adjust it to where it's perfectly level with the carburetor, not sitting like this direction because it'll get too much fuel. This way it'll starve for fuel. Right in between is perfectly level is where you want it. So I say perfectly, but ideally. So, and it will work just fine just like that. Okay, so I'm going to continue to clean up mine, clean up yours, and let's get this thing back together. Alrighty, so there she is, all cleaned up, put back together. Now we can go throw it back on. And remember, if you took those pictures, you'll be able to just work yourself backwards and put all this back together. So let's go throw it on. Okay, so I got the carburetor back on. I put the two screws back in there in our 10mm. So now I'm just going to flip the switch up. I just turned the gas on. So we'll let the gas run down through there, and worst case scenario, we'll have to choke the crap out of it. but I feel pretty confident that this thing's going to start. That one little needle valve that you seen that was plugged, the line that comes straight up into the carburetor, and I should have explained it more when I had it off, you might as well have a hose in the gasoline and no siphon process. I hope you understand that. That little screw that went sideways with that little tiny air jet allows it to create a vacuum. So it can pull fuel for a split second, which will cause the engine to start and then die immediately. It won't continue to get fuel. It can get enough for the initial start, especially if you're choking it or if you're spraying some starting fluid straight into the carburetor. It'll grab the initial start and throw it in the intake, but it won't continue to let it flow until that's cleaned. So I'm pretty sure that that's the situation here. Watch it not start now and there's something I missed, but hopefully not. So let's see if we can get it fired up. For that I need 2 hands, so I got to shut you off. Be right back. Wow, I was surprised. It only took 2 pulls, so it worked. Alrighty, so I hope this video helped you out. Please click like, please click subscribe. You can check me out or visit me at backyardmechanic.org for all my other how-to videos. And I'll get that other video to you about those Briggs and Stratton engines running on, what is it, vapors or water or O2s or whatever. You're going to love that, and a lot of people are going to be pissed, but we'll get that done for you as well. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy.